coming up just yet. But my name is Melissa from Catch the Buzz. And this is my brother-in-law, Bob. He's from He's from Bob's Adventures.
Yes.
Let's see, when did you start doing that YouTube channel, Bob?
It's been probably 5 or 6 years ago. I haven't been super active lately, but well, we can get into that when we get into the interview. But there for a while, I was very busy. So yeah, but I appreciate the opportunity to come on.
And while we're briefly waiting for people to come on, if you want to go ahead and mention what your channel has been about, and then hopefully somebody will be on and go ahead and talk about the channel a little bit.
So it started out actually more like I just wanted to create home movies because, when I was a kid, of course, I didn't grow up in the 8mm days, but I grew up in the big VCR camera days, right? Where they, you had to be able to lift weights in order to keep that thing up. And so, it's cool to be able to go watch some of those. And I just wanted to have some sort of memory of when the kids were little, right? So I started making videos about that, and that's originally what it was. And then, like, the world went crazy, like in 2020. I guess actually it probably was more like 7 or 8 years ago when I started the channel. Then, if I think about it, like that, the world has just gone by, right? Because we're 5 years from 2020 now, right? And I was doing it a couple of years before that. So anyway, a while. It's an old channel. So anyways, and so then when 2020 came, like, I just started talking about the stuff that was going on, right? I mean, how could you not, right? And then yeah, and I was younger, I guess, 8 years younger, and more outspoken, I guess, and now I just don't know what to say. Right?
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and get started, and people will probably just be coming in here in a bit, hopefully. But anyway, so you just tell us about a little bit about your growing up and stuff. Oh, hello, Ben. Hadi, haha. Hello.
So, oh, go ahead. Oh,
hi, Lynn. Hi, Nicole. Hi, Pat. Hello, Jameson. No, I don't have any gum. I wish I had some chapstick in my pocket, though. So, and this is you missed it, my brother-in-law, Bob. We're here in Idaho. He's the Bob's Adventures channel, and I'm the Catch the Buzz channel. And so Bob's going to go ahead and tell us about when he was growing up here in Idaho.
So, I grew up in Idaho, and then, to give you an idea, my kids always make fun of me and say you're from the 80s, so that gives you an idea of my age, I suppose. And grew up in a little town of about 300 people, but I didn't even grow up in that town. I grew up halfway between that town and a bigger town. So basically the middle of nowhere. I think there was 1 or 2 other kids within 5 or 6 miles of me, to just kind of give you an idea. And my parents built the house around me as I grew up, which was cool. So I actually think that that's kind of special that I had that experience. I just assumed most walls didn't have sheetrock. So, and I
know what part of Idaho. We'll just say over by Robbie Creek. If you know where Robbie Creek is, it's over there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that would be more southern. So now I'm in southeastern Idaho. So I grew up in the mountains, pine trees, all that kind of stuff. Spent my summers fishing down at the creek, and actually it was pretty blessed. I tell my kids. So I had my kids read Where the Red Fern Grows, and I know that's about the Ozarks, which is not near Idaho at all. But I said that's my closest approximation to my childhood. I would say that I really find a lot in common with the young man that wrote that. Interestingly enough, the author of that ended up in Idaho. So, yeah, I have no idea, Rusty. That's a good question. Yeah. So from there, I left high school and I joined the Air National Guard. And so, for those of you that may know or not know, the Air National Guard is the state militia. So, our primary mission is to protect the state and help out with natural disasters. And of course, in times of war, we are activated and integrate with the active duty. So, we go through all the same training that active duty does. We go through basic training and then we go on to our tech school and then we return back to our state to serve. Um, and so I'll stop there and then you can kind of ask me whatever you want to ask me from there. Did I cover enough of the early days, so to speak?
And so now you're in retired National Guard and you would work on planes. Is that what you did, working on planes?
Yeah, I started out as a crew chief on the C-130s, which are a big
Mhm.
transport aircraft, which was really cool. I'd lie if I said I don't miss that sometimes. I do. And there are other parts I don't miss at all. So, you know, and then of course, 9/11 happened, and I deployed, as many of us did, and spent a lot of time in the sand. Um, and
In
then,
Afghanistan, wasn't it? Were you in Afghanistan at
yeah,
that time?
I was in Afghanistan, Kuwait, Oman, um, Kyrgyzstan, of all places. Got to spend a couple of days in Pakistan, just everywhere, really. So I wish I could have seen more of Europe, but Europe wasn't where we were going. We would just land there for a few hours and then move on down. So yeah, and so then about halfway through my career, then I transitioned from being a crew chief, and went into personnel, which is essentially the military's word for human resources. So pretty big change, right?
Mhm.
Um, and in the background there, of course, I was going to school and getting my bachelor's degree and all of that good stuff, right? Going
Mhm.
to college when I wasn't deploying overseas, I was working a civilian job and I was in the guard and I was going to college, right? So a very busy time, but that's what young people do. And I was fortunate enough to meet my beautiful wife, and now here we are over 20 years later. So
Who is my 4 years older twin?
yeah, pretty much. They
Well,
do look like twins. Yes.
which is really
Yeah.
funny because there's an age where the kids get to be old enough where they know for sure who's their mom.
Right.
An
Right.
age
Right.
they're not so sure which one. They're not 100%, but it seems
Yeah.
like at least when they're two, they're confused. But about after that, they're a lot more sure. But anyways,
Yeah.
um, yeah, and then and of course you went to school and you're doing like special education is what you're doing, right?
So yeah. So basically, I got a degree in applied science, aerospace, right? Because I was a crew chief, and then as I could see that my military career was starting to wind down, because in the guard you can have a civilian career and a military career. So there were parts of that time where I was full time, and there were parts of that time where I was activated, right?
Hmm.
So for like a year at a time, you would go into the sandbox and come out. So that was basically wartime, right?
Hmm.
But also I held a civilian job when I would come back, and so um, I had to think about what do I want to do, and so I had a little background in human resources because of the personnel side of it. So I ended up working for a manufacturing company. I won't go into who it was; doesn't really matter. Um, but did some HR work for them. Worked on the company side with a union, so that was a unique experience to be the company person, um, and then um, and then started a master's in public administration of all things, and decided that's not really what I wanted to do because it was kind of not the only thing that you could do with it, but it was kind of geared toward planning and zoning. Um, and there were lots of reasons why I didn't really feel comfortable in that field, because by then I'm getting old enough to start to think about, what are my value systems, and does this job really align with my value systems and who I am? And so some of you will get this. Central planning isn't really my value system. For those of you that know your history and who's involved in central planning, um, and so interestingly enough, I decided, and we almost moved to Seattle and Oregon at one point to follow the airplanes, right? So all of this is happening. But understandably, my wife didn't really want to leave the area because that's where her family is and my family is there. So I said, well, I always thought it would be neat to be a school teacher. So I went back and got my elementary degree just in time for 2008 and teacher layoffs. So I was suddenly a military guy with a degree in elementary education when everyone else had 15 years experience and master's degree or above in the local area. So my competition was high, is what I'm trying to say. I remember interviewing against 50 or 60 teachers for like one position at that time, which is completely different than the environment now, right? Plus, the economy was down. It was a really hard time because we had a home that we had bought actually on a short sale. It tripled in value and then fell below even what we had originally bought it in the short sale, all in the matter of a few years. And those of you that lived through it understand, right? So suddenly we were in a house that wasn't even worth what we owed on it, and we were just trying to survive, right, in a really bad economy. And at this point, I'm, a combat veteran several times over, looking for work, have a degree. I remember riding I had a little 125cc motorcycle, and I would ride it 50 miles every day into my job. And then I would go to take my graduate classes from like 6 to 9 o'clock at night. So usually my days would start about 5 a.m. and they would end about 10 p.m. when I get back at home. And that went on for several years, actually, until we were finally able to sell the house. Meanwhile, I'm still serving, right? I know that this is probably sounds really mixed up, but it was a mixed up time. So, um, anyways, in the end, I went to an interview, and I could tell that I hadn't got the job. This was probably like the 10th or 12th interview that I'd done. I could tell I hadn't got the job. It was for like a third or fourth grade position, and I walked out and I was like, bummer, and right as I'm leaving the parking lot, I get a call and they said, well, you didn't get the job. And I knew that, right? But they said,
Thanks a lot.
but have you ever thought about being a special education teacher? And of course, in my current position with, I think, 5 children at that point, I said, tell me more, right? I'm open, I'm listening. And so they hired me as a special education teacher, but the catch to that was because I was certified in elementary, I had to go back to school again, um, and get certified in special education, which I did. So the long days continued, but it worked out. So then eventually I became a special education teacher. I retired from the National Guard, which is a whole nother story in itself that I'll go into too deeply here because there's some stuff there that would take a while to break down. But I retired from there, and then taught in the schools, which probably
Real quick,
and
if
nothing.
anybody has graduated more than Bob, let me know. Because it was kind
Yeah,
of a joke with Bob. I'm like, congratulations, Bob, you've graduated. And he's like, again, but I'm still gonna go back.
yeah.
I was like,
It's
Bob,
not.
are you addicted to school? What are you doing?
It wasn't because I wanted to. It wasn't because I wanted to, and
We
just
also
trying to
want to know where
survive.
you're from. Tell us where you're from. We're in Idaho. Tell us where you're from too. Hello. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. No, it wasn't because I wanted to. It's just kind of the way that life went. And when you're a father, you do what you have to do to put food on the table for your kids, right? And so if that means 15, 17-hour days for years and years, that's what you do. And you find a way to get gainful employment. I mean, I'm sure many of you would understand that, right? So in the end, after many years and many attempts, I've landed, a solid teaching job, and worked for a couple different schools and school districts. Everything, and that time was actually probably a fairly mellow time. I mean, there's always stuff, but then we get to 2020. So I'll leave you there.
Right.
Um, let you ask
Uh,
whatever question you want to ask.
yeah, and if any of you have any questions for Bob, he's retired National Guard. Did you go to Afghanistan? Was it twice or was it just once?
I was in Afghanistan one time. I was in Uzbekistan twice and Kuwait.
Oh, see, I didn't
Um,
even know this stuff. I didn't remember.
yeah, and then and some of it, to be honest with you, blurs.
Yeah.
And I was actually in Oman in for those of you that remember like shock and awe and all of that kind of stuff. I was in Oman just before a lot of that stuff went down. So we were at that point, we were concerned about being hit, um, because Iraq was so close. I think they said we had 7 minutes if they had launched to get into our chemical warfare gear. And so we just assumed if that happened, we weren't going to make it. Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, not to go too dark too fast, but there's a little bit of that. You just kind of accept the fact that, in certain situations, if everything goes right, you get to go home, but you may not get to go home. And that's just kind of the way it is. Right.
Well, I remember you
Um,
told me one time, wasn't there a guy who was somebody came and attacked one of the soldiers in the shower?
that was actually a friend of mine. That didn't happen to me. So that's actually a neighbor friend of mine. That was an Army Ranger,
Hmm.
um, and I won't go into too many details of his story because I'm sure certain people could probably figure out, and I don't want to share too much of his own life. But essentially, yes, he had to defend himself, and it was pretty gruesome. So,
Oh, and it was your
I think
neighbor that got attacked in the shower
so. A neighbor that I had, yeah.
while he was in the military. What area
Yeah,
was he in?
he was in the Middle East. I'm not sure exactly what his location was. Yeah.
And it was during those times too, probably, right? Like
Yeah.
2000 or
Yeah.
something.
All that stuff happened essentially from 2002. Well, after September 11th, 2001, basically, I mean, it was a 20-year war essentially, right?
Yeah.
So basically the entire time I was in the military, we were in, I mean, they didn't officially declare war, but that's what it was, right? So,
Well, and I'm sure some other people are kind of naive like I am, where I was like, "Oh, Bob, I wonder what it'd be like to go fishing in Afghanistan." You're like, "You're gonna get killed," and I was like, "Oh." Is that
yeah.
reality check of like we plan on like, man, I want to go on vacation in the United States, right? We're like, I want to go on vacation. I want this day off. I want this holiday off. We're not sitting there like, should we go to the bomb shelter, right? I
Yeah.
think that's gotten very real for a lot of us now. Especially with the technology that we have, where you can watch somebody lose their life online. You know, there's been live streams of people losing their life online and stuff.
Yeah.
And so they talk. And so the other part of this is the faith, the faith of God. And I know if you want to tell a little bit of your relationship with God, like growing up and your experience with the military and stuff, and what it was like for you to have a relationship with God during those times, and maybe how it was for other people that didn't or did.
Well, so I'll just start out by saying I'm a Christian. I believe that Christ is our Savior, right? That being said, I respect people of all faiths, right? That's part of the promise or the important part about America is you get to decide what you believe. But for me, Christ is my Savior, right? So I think that was really important for me to have that with going to those different places. And one of the things that really reinforced my faith was, if you've encountered evil or you've seen evil, you know that there must, might seem counterintuitive, but my real solidity in faith was, if there's this much evil, there has to be an opposite to it, right? It's almost a yin yang argument that I make, right? um, so, and things are very different now in the United States than they were then, right? And we're seeing, I think, collectively as a society, maybe because of social media, we have more access to it. There's that argument of, is it happening more, or is it just that we see it more? And I kind of think maybe both are true, but I do think our society has changed. Um, but I
Right.
think, yeah, I mean, that's probably the understatement of the year, right?
Yeah.
Um, But I think if there's that much evil in the world, there has to be something else, and that's probably sounds really simple, but that's my answer. So, but I think it was very important to have a faith, right, a belief system, um, when you're going through things like that, because if you don't have a reason why, nothing makes sense, right? Um, and it also, it also gets really interesting because um, you, so you might think this is strange, when you talk about the enemy, but you almost develop a deep respect for the enemy because their belief is just as strong as yours. You may disagree, but their belief is just as strong as yours, and that's respectable, right? Like that's honorable, that's respectable. It doesn't change the reality of what's going to occur if you have to defend yourself. Um, Fortunately, I didn't have to have any hand to hand stuff. I came fairly close a couple of times to being taken out, um, but never did I have to pull the trigger on someone personally, right? Of course, obviously, the work that I did on the airplanes, I'm sure contributed to some violence. I mean, that was my job, right? But um, I think that I think that's my answer, right? If there's evil in the world, then there has to be an opposite.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And it's really interesting how you said it that way because that's not exactly, I don't know that I've really like said those words that way and stuff before, but I mean, for me, I think like there's a balance, when a lot of the laws of God, there's a balance of like the good and the evil and the opposites and agency and stuff, because there can't be agency and choice if there isn't a bad choice and a good choice, right? And so, but I like how you said about, having some respect for the enemy, because I think that's too where that like love of God and Christ and stuff comes, where you can't just see them as just somebody, like when we know that like we're divinely created by God and stuff. It's like, and we know that we need to love our neighbor and stuff, and the golden rule of doing, and do to your, do unto them as you would have done unto you. I mean, when you really believe that, you can't just hate, especially somebody that you don't see. You do have to watch out for yourself, but like you said, I mean, you know whether they even believe what their country believes, they have a job they have to do, right? you know
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, and that these are the things that I wrestle with. These are the things that don't allow me to sleep at night, right? So the unfortunate thing is, and this is my belief, and I'm sure it's very politically charged, but I also believe we have the right to offend each other. It's called the freedom of speech, right? So if I offend you, then thank you. I'm being an American. So and you have the right to offend me back. So I think that losing my train of thought a little bit there, but I think that the powers, the those that really have the strings of power, um, use the goodness of men and women, use the good men and women and their good intentions against them to divide us across the planet and do horrible things to each other. Because if you ask me what I would do for my family, it would be anything. And that is both a great thing and also a terrible thing, because men and women will do horrible things in order to protect their family. But I think that the truth is, if we can somehow, I don't know what the right word is, move past that and realize that we all have more in common with each other than we do against each other, and that we're being manipulated, then I think that that's when the human race will move forward. I pray for that.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that comes down to, as you talked about, like being Christian. And hello, everybody. If you have a question or a comment, we would love to hear it. We're talking about faith and Bob's talked about his experience being in the National Guard, and we're going to discuss some emergency preparedness a little bit as well, and just some world events, things that have helped us to see faith in God and freedom for country. But anyways, trying to remember what I was going to say. But yeah, I think that's absolutely with the times of the pandemic. I know some people are like, "Oh, we're waiting for World War III to start," and I was like, "Are you kidding me? It was started at least when they united against us, because people who couldn't agree before all of a sudden were like, yeah, 2 weeks to slow the spread. I think we got to do that and stuff." And I know for you, you went from being a principal at a school, right? Or not the principal. Were you the vice principal or something? Or what
Well,
was it?
I went through an internship where I was acting as though I was a vice principal. I couldn't claim that title while in internship, but that's what I was, right? So, and I did finish that, and I've got my my administration degree, and then I ended up after that working. When you start to talk about value systems, and I'm not going to go into that particular reason here because that's a video unto itself. Um,
Well, there's your next video, Bob.
yeah. But I think that you cannot go through life if you're paying attention at all and not have moments when your value system is challenged. And I call those your Vader moments because I'm a sci-fi nerd.
Yeah.
And
If you love
I love
Star Wars, hit it down below.
yeah, I love Star Trek, Star Wars, all that stuff. And one of my favorite episodes in Star Wars is when Vader becomes Vader, because I think we all have that moment where we could become Vader. And I think that's where God gets into our lives, right? He says, here's a choice. You have to choose. And he doesn't make that choice for us. That's what I believe, because I believe that's what the other side does, is take your choice away. They don't
Yes.
they don't give you a choice. They tell you what it's going to be, right? And I don't believe that God wants that for us. So I think he wants us to make a choice and come to him because we choose to do so. Because otherwise it lacks meaning.
Well, and that was the problem with a lot of churches and countries making people do certain things and stuff. As I say, I'm like, you can love chocolate cake, but if somebody's making you eat chocolate cake, you don't want to eat it. Even if you love chocolate cake, you don't want to eat it
Absolutely.
because you're being made to do it. And
Absolutely.
that removes your agency, your choice, your happiness, your sorrow, your joy. You don't enjoy being made to do something. You might be okay with it at first because you're like, I love chocolate cake, but now you're like, I'm being made to do this. I don't want to do that, So
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to get me to eat broccoli is tell me not to eat broccoli. And if you
yeah.
believe that, I've got a drink I'll tell you too. So yeah. So I'm sorry, you asked a question there and I kind of derailed, but that was just something I felt like I needed to communicate. So
Well, and I think the thing is too is part of what Catch the Buzz that I really liked is in doing this YouTube channel was talking about the things that are in media that help you to like see truth. And like to me, everybody is born with knowing some right and wrong, but it's all these things in life that cloud it, make it a bunch of gray areas and stuff. Because it was like you were referring to before with being in war. Hey, the other guy, the other side of this war, they are believing that they're supposed to be doing what they're doing too, and so I can't fully judge on that because people get raised in a certain way, they're in a certain environment, and some people are just raised to survive the whole time. I mean, we just had a situation in the parking lot at work the other day, and they had to call the cops for the delivery drivers for the place that I work for that we pick people's groceries. The police have been in our work the last 2 days in a row and stuff. And so, I mean, the world is just changing. There's places I went and visited in Salt Lake, and here I am at the grocery store, and there's police officers in Salt Lake and stuff. And I'm in Texas, which I don't think this is new in Texas. My husband said it's been going on for a while, but there's officers there in a store that I was in Texas. And I can see how people come to this area and they just feel so much more at ease and at peace. And there's good feeling here. And the area that you live in, because you're more central Idaho. I'm more like west side in Idaho. We're both in the southern area. What kinds of people are coming there? Because I know you had a Chinese lady or something that was renting part of your house at one point or something.
Yeah, so I mean, Jerome is kind of interesting because it's definitely not when it was 30 years ago or 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. I mean, the whole country is changing demographically, right? And
Mhm.
so if you're paying attention at all, you know why that is. Okay.
Yeah.
So, um, but, you know, at the same time, I feel like this is a pretty good place to be. Um, I don't feel like there's a lot of, I haven't experienced any real racial tension at all. Um, um, you know, and we have a lot of non-native English speakers, non-citizens. I would hazard a guess. I mean, I can't say you are and you aren't. I don't know, but I
Mhm.
think it's you can figure that out, right? Um, but it's interesting because, and this is, I don't know if this is something you want to talk about or not, but it's our reality, right? Like how we construct our reality. And, if I probably watch way too much YouTube, right? And
There's a
consume a
balance.
lot of, yeah, and that algorithm, I think, all of this stuff in terms of human beings is brand new. It's like, you know, for lack of a better term, you know, we monkeys got a new toy, and the toy is the internet, and we created, social media out of it. And I'm not an old man yet, but I'm not a young man, and I remember a time before any of this existed. And so I remember when you got the news from the newspaper, if you were lucky enough to be able to afford the newspaper, or it was delivered to where you live, which it was not delivered where I lived.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, we used to wait for the bookmobile, for any of you that know what that is, and it would only come around once a month. And I would
Yeah.
walk a mile and a half down from my house. I would walk a mile and a half down to the road and wait for the bookmobile to show up, and then I would put down what I would select from a catalog, paper. Remember
Hmm.
paper? So I'm joking. And I would
Right.
select from a catalog which book I would like to read, and then I would
Hmm.
wait another month for the bookmobile to come back and hope that they were able to get that book in that time so that I could read it. So that
Yeah.
was the world 35, 40 years ago, right?
Hmm.
Um, the world now is completely instantaneous, which I will admit some of that is absolutely fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Some of it is not. So um, Yeah, take that. But the point I was going for was YouTube. I think as human beings, we're becoming more aware of the algorithm and the fact that
Hmm.
we get in. I think the term is echo chambers. We get into these echo chambers. I'm completely guilty of being in an echo chamber. A combat veteran. Yeah, sometimes my view of reality is fairly negative. Shocker,
Yeah.
right? So it's really easy for me to go down these negative, weird paths, right? So I have to be aware of that. I have to be careful of that, and I think that's new for human beings. I don't think we've ever had that problem in that way before. That's new, right? And the
Not to
younger,
like to the scale of
yeah,
and like well, as we were talking about earlier, is like with the AI stuff, it's amazing and scary,
yeah, yeah,
because you can make anything look like something. And you're sitting there just looking, you're like, I wish I could say that I know for sure what that is, but I don't know. If you
yeah,
guys have anything to say about AI, go right ahead. Go ahead.
yeah,
Put it in the comments.
yeah. And so I'm going to write this down before I forget again, because I find more and more that I just lose my thoughts. So figure that out. Wow, yeah. So where I was going with that is our construction of reality, right? And
Hmm.
so growing up, reality obviously was smaller because I was younger, right? But also
Hmm.
too, my reality was smaller because it was within a
Limited
smaller range.
parameters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there were perimeter, and so now the world, or at least the simulated world, is available to me 24/7 anytime I want it, right? And that simulated world is probably dictated by the algorithm that I'm selecting and then being manipulated back by, right? Like there's this feeding thing, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that's definitely having a huge impact on our society, right? So I try to be aware of that, but I'm human and I can be manipulated just like everybody else can, right? And so it comes up when you talk to someone and you think, oh, everyone's talking about this, and then you realize, no, I'm the only weirdo that saw that because of my path down this, right, down this algorithm. But if I call it the stepping on the front porch rule.
Mhm.
So I live in Idaho, right? So when I walk out my porch, I live in a small. Most of you wouldn't consider it urban, although I do because I grew up in the middle of nowhere. Most of you wouldn't consider it a city, but I do. I mean, we're talking 10, 11,000 people. It's got more than one traffic light, so to me, it's a city. So but I call it the front porch. I can sit here and I can watch a bunch of YouTube videos and like go, oh my gosh, the world is on fire, which I think it is. All this stuff is happening all over the world, and I'm taking all this information in, and you can feel the changes in your body, right? Right. So, but then, for me, I'm a coffee drinker. So I pour a cup of coffee. It's early morning. I walk out on the porch, and none of that is happening in front of me. None of the stuff that I saw on YouTube it's relevant, but it has no relevance for where I live, right? And so it's like living in two different worlds at the same time. And so what is reality, right? And so, I mean, I can go into Plato a little bit too, because I mean, there's this. I don't know how far you want to go down that, but there's the allegory of the cave, right? Plato, Greek philosopher thousands of years ago, and he wrestled. All the Greeks wrestled with the construction of reality, right? But I guess my point is that I think what's really interesting is because of social media, which I think absolutely could be a great gift to the world, but could also potentially cause us to destroy each other,
Right.
right? And AI could go either way. Um, the constructed reality or the shared reality that we have, your neighbor might be watching completely different things than you, and even though you live in the same town and are experiencing that reality together, we're being influenced by this other reality. And now with AI, we
Yeah.
don't even know if what we're watching is real.
And not even just the AI, just the other regular news stuff. Because, like I say, we're Joe Schmoes and we're putting stuff out here, right?
Right.
And it's like, and we could just be feeding people a bunch of crap. But, that's why I say to me, it's
A
like,
lot of people told me I'm full of it over the years. So
but we all got to be full of a little bit. Hey, JoJo! That's my friend, the Joyce genealogist, JoJo. JoJo, this is my brother in law, Bob. He's married to my twin, who's 4 years older than me. But our kids, well, I know at least their kids for sure would get my sister and I mixed up till they were like 2 years old, at least, and not be 100% sure who their mom was.
yeah.
Bob's retired National Guard. Served in several places that I didn't even remember because we were all, because I was busy having kids and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. Life was happening, right?
But
So
and with JoJo talking about genealogy and stuff too, I think that's one of those important things too, is that like that knowledge of like God and us being family. And I think the important thing for people like that kind of knowing where they come from and stuff, because sometimes what people see in front of them, like we we're talking about your reality of your environment, part of that is like your history too. And so sometimes what people the family they see in front of them is not so great. And so I think the great thing is when people go to find out about like family history and like DNA tests. That's another technology kind of thing we're talking about. And then Jojo, I think, didn't you say? Yep, he's my brother-in-law. We're crazy people in Idaho. He's got the Idaho beard.
yeah.
From Idaho. But
Yeah.
Jojo, wasn't it like the fam roots tech? Was it like 90% of the people? Which Family Search was started by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I think it was like 90% of the of the attendants for Root Tech were not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Isn't that right? I think it was like 90% were not from our church. Yeah, she's going. Oh, you lived in Idaho Falls. That's cool. Yeah. So was that right, Jody? Is it like 90% of the attendees for Roots Tech, which is like a big family search thing that happens? And I think JoJo and I, we were talking about early on her live stream. Yes, 90%. And the Roots Tech, is that in March? Is that right? She was talking about on her live stream on her channel earlier. Mm-hmm. I think that's the case. It was like in March. But anyways, but see, that's amazing because people sit there and they think like, oh, only people of a certain faith and demographic are doing these things. But when people want your medical history, March 6th through 8th, thank you. When people want your medical history, you don't have anything to say, because you don't know. But the other thing is too, is if what you're looking at in front of you, it doesn't feel like they're faithful people, they're hardworking people, maybe they've just got a lot of addiction, so maybe something happened. For me, I look at like being in war, kind of like part of the lesson of like Harry Potter to me is like Voldemort, he gets ripped into like 7 different pieces, his soul and everything, because he ends lives. I'll say he ends lives to be able to split himself. And to me, when you're in war, there's some of that happens because it's not with God for us to take somebody's life. But it is your calling of your situation, but that doesn't mean that your soul isn't grieving for that loss. And I think that's what people forget about things like, well, it's my body, my choice, for example. That's another way of taking a life when you decide to end, terminate a young life. I don't know if I'm going to get censored or whatever if I flag it,
America, say what you think.
But, if you choose to end a life of a fetus, the problem is people go, oh, well, that it's just cells and whatever. But to me, they haven't said when like a spirit enters a body. But for me, in the scriptures, it says, I think it's in like Genesis, it says like everything creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth has a spirit. And so for me, if it can move, there's a spirit there. And I can't remember what it's called, but they have taken like a video or something of when a egg gets fertilized and it sends off this like cloud of zinc or something, but it makes light happen and stuff. And so when I think of like Jesus as the light of the world, and I think of like that he has paid the price for us with his blood, then I feel like there's like that connection that happens there. And so to me, I'm like, when you have that connection with God and with Christ and stuff, it isn't it's never just cells. It's the potential for someone. And we don't know what, there's a lot of things that we don't know. But again, too, I think that, you talked about like respecting people and people of different faiths. I think that too often people go, well, I know this stuff, so I can go and attack people from other faiths. And I call that the sword of righteousness, where it's like you can swing that sword of righteousness, but as you do it, it's like it's got blades in the hilt and it's going to hurt you for sure. You might wound a couple others, but you will hurt yourself for sure. And as we know, Christ is coming again. And I'm like, I don't think anybody who does that is going to be like, oh yeah, is going to feel just good going up to him, who is like love and light and joy. Treating our neighbor that way, that's not love and joy. I mean, I've had in one comment one time, commenting another channel, they were like, being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In one comment, the person says, well, you're not a part of the body of Christ, because I was talking about uniting the body of Christ. He's like, you're not a part of the body of Christ. You are a member of a cult. And I was like, wow, that's nice. But did it hurt me? No, it really didn't hurt me, but I felt bad for them. Because I'm like, when Christ comes back, they're not going to be feeling so great because, and he said, as you do unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. So I'm like, you're doing that to me. You're like doing that to Christ. Like, I don't see how people can separate, like I say, God is about love, and to me, the lesson of Christ for frankly forgiving the thief on the cross was like, that we got to forgive even in our darkest hour. And like you said, like in the military, like just because somebody's on the other team doesn't mean that they're not a brother or a sister, And like I've just said before that I don't really like the term like, oh, just humanity. I'm like, no, it goes farther than that. And like kindness. I'm like, no, we have to love. We have to go beyond kindness to love. And I'm sure that's one of those things that you has kept you, as you were saying before, with like your faith and being like, no, I can't, it isn't nothing to just go and do something terrible to somebody. Like, I got to know what I'm doing. I do have a job to do, but I have a devotion to God as well. And I don't just throw that out the door for whatever I'm just told to do. I hope, you know, it is hard.
Yeah. I don't tend to have even a beginning of the answers. But I do know that the story of Christ is a story of redemption, and that none of us can make the mark. That's to me what I got out of the whole story. So all you can do is be humble and ask for forgiveness, because none of us make it, and so we can't. We're not able to. That's the story. Is that none of us are good enough, right? None of us are worthy, and the only way that we can get in the door is through asking for forgiveness and the love of Christ. That's what I believe, because I know I'm not worthy. There's no way I'm worthy, right? Because I've had to do what I had to do to survive, right? And so there is a man by the name of Faulkner. I can't remember his first name, but he writes a so if I remember correctly, and if someone knows better in the chat, please correct me, but I believe his story is he is a Holocaust survivor, and one of the which I cannot even begin to compare my experiences with that. I wouldn't even try. So but one of the things that he says is that the best of us did not survive, right? And if you read his book, he tells you why he thinks he's not the best, right? Because and I wouldn't judge him for what he had to do. I don't think anybody under those circumstances, how could you even begin to understand those circumstances? But what he's trying to say, without going into too much detail, and I don't want to misquote, is basically the Holocaust survivors that did survive, many of them did what they had to do to survive, right? And so it's very sad, right? And so what he's saying is that the best of us don't survive, right? And so there's something innately human. I'm not saying that humans are bad. I'm saying that we're wired to survive. And because we're wired to survive, sometimes we do things that are not good, right? So to me, I don't pretend to be an expert, but that's why Christ came, because we're not able to do it without, we're not worthy, right? We're just not. And so it's only through forgiveness that we get to go see God. That's what I believe.
Yeah, and JoJo, she's talking about, I love Harry Potter analogies, and that's part of how I survived during the pandemic and stuff. I looked it back up on my Facebook, and I'm going to do a video on this where I have like Harry Potter quotes, Lord of the Rings quotes, Star Wars quotes, I think even too. But that's the thing, is I think that especially when you have that, the moral compass and stuff too, it helps you to see the good things in the world and in life, and it helps you to be, I call it like showing up for class, in God's class every day, and being like, what can you teach me? It's like I was saying earlier, I was doing a live stream earlier, and I was talking about how, you know, I do fires to help to heat our home, and I'll get frustrated. It's like taking me an hour, but I'm like, you know what? But since I say that I'm in God's classroom there, because I just try to learn spiritual things about myself and others while I'm doing these fires, then I'm like, well, apparently I needed a lot of schooling today because I was doing a fire for an hour or more and stuff. But I had a time where I was like, this log, this stick like fell. And I was like, what? And then the thoughts, impressions came to me that it's like, just because there's a fall doesn't mean that like it's all over and there's a mistake. Sometimes it's God putting you where he needs you so you will burn, you know. And that doesn't mean, well, and that can be good or that could be bad. It is all up to our choosing. But I think that, you know, we do get the opportunity to have faith and do good. And one of the things I learned from the Chosen show, that I'd heard in scripture. But what I love about The Chosen is you're seeing them acting the things out. And so you go like, oh, is that in scripture? And he said, like, don't let this replace your scripture reading. He's like, watch the show, please, and then go read your scriptures and understand it better because you've seen it acted, a lot of it acted out. And Jonathan Rumi says, this, God provides for the sparrow. The sparrow just flies around. And I mean, we don't know what the life of a sparrow is, but he's like, God provides for that sparrow. And I just think that so often, part of being an ADD-ish mind and stuff, and where people go like, oh, well, that's not normal. I'm like, I want to make a video where I have a cardboard cut out. And it's like, let me introduce you to normal. And it like falls over because it's not real, right? Like I used to say normal is all relative, but not my relatives.
Okay.
But people have loved it when I said that. They're like, I'm going to write that down. But that's the thing, is this fake reality of what anybody is supposed to be, how a man is supposed to be, how a woman is supposed to be. And I just I love having the opportunity to know that I can be myself, knowing that I'm loved. And I think that that's one of the biggest things for people to know is like, I just want to say to people over and over again, like, God knows your name. He knows you. He loves you. He sees you. He cares for you. And he wants to help you. And all we have to do is ask, or in my case, be quiet sometimes and listen.
One of my favorite quotes from the Ten Commandments, it's kind of a classic. I don't know how many people watch it still anymore, but Nefertiti is talking to Moses, and she basically is offering all sorts of things to him if he does not choose the path that he's choosing, right, to go be with his people. And even I have to go, man, you could do it so much easier if you were just Pharaoh, man, right? but that's not the point. I get that's not the point. But every time I watch it, I'm like, but he says to her, yes, you might be the lovely dust through which God works his purpose, right? And so that always reminds me we are dust, right? And where our soul might be immortal, but our body is very temporary, right? So sometimes we just are the clay, probably most of the time, right? Anyway, just a thought.
Well, I'm trying to remember how somebody said it, but I love it how they said that they're like, we're like passing through on this journey of life, and this is not our home. Like this is not our home.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think that if you think of things in that perspective, like there's been too much separation from people to be like, oh, well, you go to this church and this is what your beliefs. And I'm just like, we should not be teaching people about each other's churches and stuff, because let them go and ask that church and let them represent themselves. That's not fair. None of us would want somebody to go and speak about our church and say, well, this is how they are and this is what they believe, unless they're going to be kind or something, but they, to misrepresent somebody's belief system. But, and so, and I know that that's one of those things that really turns people off to religion and stuff, is they introduce this division and stuff like that. And that is the same thing that's being done to us in the world right now, is trying to make people think that they're so divided. But to me, a lot of us are really trying to worship the same God and everything. We just call him by a different name. We have a little bit of a different understanding. But guess what? Like, none of us know everything. We don't. There isn't any of us that can say that we know everything, because our brains can only handle so much. I know that we would like just kind of explode if we were there's just too much to understand. And it's like, and God knew that we could only handle certain laws and expectations and stuff for this time. And so to me, it's like, so we do the best with the laws that he's given us. We go by those ones, and then hope to be good enough to be around later, to do good, to do more, and to do better. But yeah,
the older I get, the more I realize I don't know anything, right? So when I was 20, I knew everything, and I've progressively gotten less smart every year afterward, right?
But actually more wise.
Yeah, wise enough to know I don't know, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to say this in as kind of way as I can, and I'm sure many people will disagree with me, but I don't think any of us have it all right, right? I don't think any of us do. I think that people of faith, of most of the religions out there, are doing their best with the knowledge that they have available. But I don't know that any of us have the whole story, right? Something went down 2025 years ago, and it was a big deal, right? And I believe that was Christ, right? And that he will return. However, when we're talking about, I don't even know what the right word is other than God, a being, which I don't even think that's the appropriate word, a being capable of constructing the universe, right? When I think of my sons and daughters, I can't think of what they could do that would make me not love them. I may not be happy with them. That happens quite a bit, right? But I
Yeah.
would always love them. And so I cannot imagine a being able to construct the universe would be less empathetic, right? And so I think that's what Jesus is about. I know I keep saying that over and over again. Hopefully I'm not beating a dead horse, but I think that's what it's about, right? So, I mean, he's saying, I've given you a shot here, take it, right? So there's
Yeah.
that joke, two boats in a helicopter. Have you heard that joke?
I don't think so.
Okay. So, yeah. So there's, I'm trying to think, it might be in poor taste because of the hurricane recently, but hopefully people will take this for what it is. So there's a flood, right? Or a hurricane or disaster. And this guy is, up on his front porch because he's on the second floor, he's on the porch and the water's rising, right? And a guy comes by in a rowboat and he said, do you need a lift out of here? He says, nope, the Lord is going to save me. Right?
Oh,
You heard this song? Okay. I'll finish it. Yeah, I'll finish it even when you heard it because other people might not. And so the guy goes, okay, and he leaves. And so then he's standing up on the roof, right? He's a person of faith. He's, goes to church, does all the right stuff. And the guy comes by in a larger boat, a speedboat, and says, do you want to lift out of here? He says, no, the Lord is going to save me. And so then now he's up to like his chest, right? Like he's on top of his house, it's up to his chest, and he can like stick his hand out. That's about it. And a helicopter comes over, and they're like, "Hey, do you need a lift out of here?" And he says, "No, the Lord's going to save me." Well, he drowns and dies, right? And he gets up to the pearly gates, and he says, "Saint Peter, I don't understand
yeah.
it. I always went to church. I tried to be kind to people." And Saint Peter looks at him and he goes, "Well, what did you want? He sent 2 boats and a helicopter."
Yeah, right. But that's all of us some days, right? We're like, but I just need this. Well, I have a friend that's doing really well being single right now. She's trying really hard to stay single. I'm trying to help, but she's, I love it if she was watching and she's like, hey, I'm like, go ahead.
Yeah.
But one quote that I love, have you heard of the group called King and Country? They're a Christian youth group.
I don't know if I have or not.
Yeah, what Small Bones. Their last name is Small Bones. And they came from Australia and they were just like super poor. And I think they said they lived on the beach in a tent or something like that for a while because they were so poor. Anyways, but of course they're doing great now. But from one of their concerts where they did their Christmas concert where they sing this Me and My Drum, the little drummer boy song. This quote that they came out, I love it. It says, it's remarkable to think that a baby born in a stable, no prestige or privilege, no social media or social status, political campaigns or private airplanes, and yet he flipped the world on its head. He turned BC into AD. He's the most famous name around the globe, inspired the most read book ever written, which is the Bible. He reconnected us to heaven, and in turn brought heaven down to earth. And now he offers us redemption, a fresh start, freedom, so that we can hold our heads high and march through this life, knowing that we are never alone. every woman and man, every girl and boy, to all of us who feel like we have nothing left to bring, nothing to give, that we can know that God is smiling at us, that He's loving us, that you are enough. Let us celebrate the greatest news that the world has ever known. And that was their message for like Christmas. But I'm like, I love how they're like, He's the one that flipped it from, BC to AD. And what I love too, understanding about other languages, and I have a friend from Kenya, and we were talking about language. And as I was looking up, from other languages, you could pretty much identify the name of Jesus Christ for the most part. You might not understand hardly anything else the person was saying, but you could kind of feel where his name was. And to me, like, there's real significance in that, because so our prophet, our church president, Russell M. Nelson, he challenged us just before COVID to mark God, Jesus Christ, the Holy Ghost, the Spirit, things like that in our scriptures. And the lesson I got from that is like just God, Christ, it's just, the Holy Ghost is everywhere. It's everywhere and stuff. And to me, it's like our job to recognize that. And like you said, like with your joke where it's like, I sent all these to save you. And, a lot of times it's like we have to go to where we need God to part the sea. And we go like, oh, why is this scary? Why is this so hard? Because you're not going to see the miracle that I can provide for you until you get to there. And I know you said that you guys rented out part of your house so that you were able to make a job change. And now you're teaching online to people in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. And I mean, what does that do for you as far as being somebody that's from the United States of America, a U.S. citizen? What does that do for you when you come across these people from other countries? And
Well, I think it's I have a lot of fun with it. So we have an online tutoring company, and right now we're doing mostly continental United States. But when I first started, I worked for another company before I started mine, and I worked with kids in Hong Kong and China and all those places. And then I also am a ham radio operator. That's my hobby, right? So I talk to people all over the world every day. Because our joke is because I'm a ham, right? But I really enjoy it because, going back to the YouTube thing, there's a lot of positives about it, but it also can be very negative. And, it's kind of that porch test, right? When I was talking about ham radio, it can be that for me as well as my business, because when I talk to these people all over the world, what you realize is no matter where they're at, we're all pretty much the same, right? It's, if it's my students, it's parents trying to give the best possible start to the kid that they can. They're making sacrifices to do it, right? To give their kid a start, right? It's love, right? And then when you talk about ham radio, it's just a bunch of guys. I don't care if they're speaking Chinese or or they're over in England or whatever. They just want to talk to other human beings, right? It's just there's something about people that want to connect to people, right? I don't I don't know what it is about us, but that's how we are, right? I mean, the joke is that ham radio operators are really actually just um, what's the term when you're not around people very much? We're hermits who like to connect with other people through radio, right? We're confused, right? But I think it's more about just connecting with someone who has a similar interest to you, right? But I recently got into digital radio, and there's a way that I'm able to connect over to China, and with all the stuff in the news, I was just like, well, I'm just going to say hello and see what happens. They're speaking Chinese. I have no idea what they're saying, but you can kind of get the rhythm of the conversation, and you wait till there's a pause because you don't want to talk over them. And I give my call sign in English and say hello. And then there was this silence, like this radio had been chatter the whole time. I thought, well, this is interesting. And then all of a sudden they come back, they go, oh, CQ, America, hello, we love you, right? And then they said, don't go," because hands write down their contacts and where they got contacts from. So we exchanged, the city and the country that we're from. And I said, "I'll come back. I have to work," but I did as many as I could. But they just wanted that opportunity, and I wanted that because I'm writing down theirs, and I'm getting on Google and looking up where they live and looking at the pictures of where they live. Like, I think that makes the world better, right? So, so I think for me, it helps me remember that there's a difference between governments and people, right? Governments do what governments do, and but most people are just trying to raise their family and live their lives, right?
Well, and that's one of the things I love about when you hear stuff talking about like knowing what's true and what's not true and stuff. And one of the things when they were talking about, I can't remember what it's called. There's a satellite that they've had that they're getting all these pictures from that they're like, do you know what it is? There's a satellite that's just amazing that they've had out there, and they're like, we're getting all these pictures. I can't remember what it's called. Do you remember that satellite?
Well, like out in space, like Voyager, is that what you're talking
Yep.
about? Yeah, Voyager. There's Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. I think
But
there's a
there's,
couple other ones, but I can't remember their names.
but yeah, there's something else. It's not that name, but it's something else. I can't. It's
There's
like named
Hubble.
after. It's like named
Yeah,
after somebody or something. It has like a person name.
there's is it Copernicus?
If anybody else knows, tell me because I can't not remembering this.
Well, Hubble was the one when I was a kid, but they just replaced it with another one that's even better, and I can't remember
Yeah,
what it's called.
yeah,
Um,
that's the
but
one.
anyway, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But you hear different things, and once you like we talk about kind of going down rabbit holes and learning about different things, and then you just start seeing things differently. Jack, hello, Jack Lemon. He says, I'm here, but I'm so tired. I know it's almost, I don't know what time it is for you there, but it's 10 o'clock. You're in Washington, I remember. But yeah, so one thing that I remember hearing about when they were showing all these pictures from space, and another thing I think was coming from NASA, it was talking about quantum entanglement and how they learned that something in space, you could affect one thing really far away from another thing. And they're like, we don't understand how that works. But to me, that's like God, and that's like us being his children and all being like family, more than just humanity, being closer than that family, and so that's what I love about what you were saying about doing the ham radio and stuff. Is to me, that's like the same thing. I mean, I know that there was a worldwide day of fast during 2020, and a lot of people were praying and fasting. It was started by our prophet, President Russell M. Nelson, had said we want to have a national, we want to have a national day of prayer and fast. Anybody who'd like to join, we'd love to have you join. And there was people from all kinds of groups that were joining that, and they're like, and does anybody need prayers? Some people. Some missionaries that were shut in that couldn't go out anywhere in California, they were just like, hey, well, we're just going to invite some people to pray and fast and just kind of make this a spiritual kind of thing to just, unite people in something good, positive in prayer and, worshiping God and that type of thing. And so they put that out, and it was just growing by thousands of people a day, or more than thousands a day. Anyways, and one thing is people are asking for prayers, and I was like, oh, well, I lost my wedding ring. So I was like, yeah, maybe, sure, I'll ask for some prayers for that. And anyways, I was like, I'll ask for some prayers for that. And I tell you, like, it was really quickly, there was like 1,000 people that were praying for me. And there was people that commented, their experiences with losing things, rings and stuff like that. And some people would type out their prayer for me. And I tell you, I could just feel that, and I think that is what the world tries to do, is make everything feel separate and in a box. And I'm like, when it comes down to it, God created it all, right? And so all these things, there's like part of him in a lot of these things, and they're connected because he's the creator. And I think that is one of those things why they want all these find as many divisions as possible, because when you're trying to like follow God and follow Christ and the example that Christ set, like you want to be with people, like you say, it's like there's that desire to connect with each other, and I can feel the excitement you had when you had the people from China. They were like, wait, hello, because it's like it is so exciting to be like, oh, we want to hear from me. You want to see me, you know? So
Yeah.
Jacqueline says taking care of terminally ill parents is exhausting as all. Yeah, I understand that my grandma lived with my parents for a long time, and my grandfather was had a heart attack and a stroke and was paralyzed on half his body and lived with us for a while till he passed away. But yeah, my parents had my grandma living with them for 26 years, and Frank is still there, and he was born with cleft palate and hair lip, which does not cause anything mentally, but my grandma feels like he was born mentally normal, but he didn't get enough oxygen because it was so many years ago. Because gosh, my dad said he's like 70, that he is 72, my dad. And then Frank's in his 60s or something. I don't know. But people always think he's older than he is. But anyways, yeah, it's a tough thing. And that's the thing is like with what I do, picking people's groceries, and kind of like with what Bob was saying, everybody's just a person trying to do what they can do. And I've had people kind of complain because they're like, well, gosh, this person doesn't need their groceries delivered to them, or they don't need a grocery pickup. I'm like, you don't know what they're going through at home. You don't know that they're not taking care of their parents. You don't know that they don't have somebody with a disability. You don't know that they aren't somebody who suffers from, severe pain or migraines or something, or is worried about if their child is going to be there when they get home because they're struggling with some, different issues and stuff. And so I think that's the thing is it's like things like YouTube and ham radio give people the opportunity to just connect with their brothers and sisters, and then it's our choice what we do when we connect, right? Are we going to love and be like, because it's like, it should be like a reunion. Hey, hello, and not be like, yeah, well, and that's like we said with the AI that is scary. And we've been told before that like we would have to have like the spirit and stuff to be able to know, and a relationship with God to like know what's true. And people aren't seeing that right now. I don't know what's going to show it to you. And even during COVID, right? Like during that time, I just remember when I was working at the temple, the temple president, he was a retired doctor. And he was like, people always ask me how I keep myself from getting sick. He's like, I wash my hands a lot. And he was like, you need to wash them for 26 seconds, at least 26 seconds. So sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, the ABC song. I was like, my dumb, I didn't realize that the ABC song and Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star are the same tune. Did you notice that? I didn't notice that. And I was like, wow, I'm like 40 or something. I just realized they're the same
It never came up. It never came up, right?
Never thought about that. But anyways, it was perfect timing. I don't know why we're getting feedback. Like I'm hearing me talk.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's getting to be about the time to get off anyways, I think. So that's our signal.
Maybe.
So I'm hearing myself echo back to you.
Yeah, I can hear it just a little bit all of a sudden. I don't know why.
I don't know. Anyways, we'll have to do this again because I know we didn't really talk on emergency preparedness, but that's an important thing to kind of bring up. And there's so much stuff going on right now. It's something that people need to know about. And like I say, to me, the first step is working on that relationship with God or whatever you believe, and keeps you like morally grounded. And see what you can do to like, God, what should I do? Because what we might need to do is going to be different than somebody else.
Yeah, and I think for me, I've gotten to the point where, hopefully I have many years left, but nobody knows, right? But I think at the point now, I mean, I would be what you would consider probably a prepper, right? And at this point, I don't think I'm necessarily prepping because I think I would make it through, but I want my kids to have some resources even when I'm not here, right? So, I mean, it depends on what happens, right? And we don't know that anything will happen, right? But I think that the reality is if it got really, really bad, most of us probably wouldn't make it, but it would be our children that have to rebuild, right? And so for me, I think if I have some things that maybe would be useful to them, and maybe I've shown them how to do some of those things, maybe they can rebuild the world, right? And so, not to be too dark, but another 10 years go by. I mean, how probably wouldn't fare too well if all of a sudden all the power went out, right? So I think that's where you have to reconcile and say, okay, well, I understand that I'm not eternal on this earth, and you have to make peace with God, which I think is what you're saying. But then while you're here, you try to do as much as you can for those that come after you. I think that's all that you can do.
Yep. And to me, God blesses us for trying.
Yeah.
You know, we get credit for trying.
But that doesn't mean I'm not feisty. I'd be the frog going down the pelican's mouth for sure, for those of you that have ever seen that picture, right? So, but we also have to realize that every day we do get a little bit older, right? And so, I think at this point where I'm at, I'm kind of that, my generation, for lack of a better term, we're the ones that are starting to carry, we're a carrying society right now, right? Meaning that we're still young enough that we have the strength to do so, but we're not young that we can go be crazy, right?
Yeah.
But it'll happen fast that we'll be the old ones, right? And so I think all that we can do is, I think they call it legacy, right? Not because I want to be full of pride, and I don't think people will remember me very long at all, right? But if at least I can leave my kids with something, right? Maybe they can build a better world, because I know that we didn't do a good job.
We've been sabotaged.
The deck might have been stacked. Yeah, that might be fair.
You're retired military.
Yeah.
You know too many things. Thank you. Truth. Yes.
Truth? Yeah. Which part is true? All of it, some of it, none of it, right? Maybe the deck being stacked, is that the truth? Yeah.
Is that Alan? Alan, I think.
Yeah. Is it?
Our brother-in-law, Alan. The beard.
Well, he's a good guy. He's got a beard. I mean, he passed all the tests for me, so that's all it took. So, anyway. Well, at least I won't use that word, but at least you gave him all you could for 2 weeks. Good on you. Yeah.
See, Mom, you lasted longer. For Alan, it was 2 weeks, and he was already crazy.
Diet white Bob. Yeah. Go for the Gandalf look. I don't know if I'm ready for the Gandalf stage quite yet. Santa. Okay, that's better. I guess there's worse things that you could be called than Santa.
None shall pass.
Yeah, and I do like sugar cookies, so that might be my next job. Very good. I don't think I can. Yeah. Anyway. I thought I was too crazy. Yeah, so that makes me think of the Patriot, when they're standing outside for those of you that have seen it, when they're going to recruit people, and they're standing outside of the bar, and he says, "Sir, I don't think these are the kind of men that we need." Right? And then he opens the door and he says, "Long live King George," and they all throw their knives and axes at him. And he goes, "This is exactly the sort of men we need." You would have done a great job. That's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes a little crazy is useful.
Well, thanks for joining us. Even though my sound is messed up and I'm delayed on my speaking. So Bob's got to read the comments. It sounds terrible.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I'm not even going to respond to that because my mom told me if you can't say anything nice, you can finish that. All right, you can be on the team. All right. What else you got for me?
Oh, I wish the sound wasn't doing this. But yeah.
So as I say, those are all the things that I know, which is not very much. So it didn't take very long to do. Yeah.
Anyways, all right, we're gonna wrap it up because this is gonna drive me crazy. Unless I just let Bob and my other brother-in-law talk about just the whole time, which would be entertaining. But
Yeah.
it's
I've
getting like
I've got all sorts of responses, but I'm going to hold back a little.
Till next time.
Till next time. Yeah. All I know is
must come to
10 more
an end.
days. 10 more days. That's all I'm saying. Well, actually, what is it? The 20th or the 21st? We're down to 9 or 10 days, right?
Yeah, is today the 11th?
Today's the 11th. Yeah. Yeah. I'll be glad for February. Come on, February. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity. It was fun. Hopefully people enjoyed it.
Yep, and thanks for everybody that joined in. I should have messaged some people and let them know, but
yeah, we can do it again sometime.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Well, next time we need to bring him on too. So then you have 3 of us, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure how we can do that.
But it is a Christian channel, so we have to be, we got to be careful.
Mm-hmm.
We might get going back and forth a little bit.
What is it like?
You're watching, yeah, like this.
Oh,
Circle of trust for those that know that reference. Circle of trust.
This is what family gets together. See?
Yeah. Yeah. You'll have to go back and watch the replay.
Yeah.
It might put you to sleep, but
At least you'll be sleeping then, right, Bob?
Yeah.
All right.
All righty. Okay.
Good night.
Bye. We'll see you later. Take care.
Bye.